Welcome to Monarchist Minute, Royalist news and discussion out of the good old US of A. I am Charles York. We have Santiago Rivera. Yes.
Hello.
We have Joe. And
So,
today we have two main important topics. Us three, by ourselves, are going to solve two of the most important issues of our time. Cheap plastic radios and acid paper paperbacks. No, seriously, if you read like the kind of sci-fi I do, and you're somehow able to keep one of those acid paper books in good nick by the time you're done with it, you need to teach me how to do that. But we're actually going to solve two somewhat less important problems. We're going to solve poverty, but first, what's the deal with this energy stuff? I mean, it's like, ugh. Joe, you want to tell us about some of this energy thing?
Well, if I may,
Oh,
Chuck.
right.
Yeah, no. So I think we're going to do this more in a question format. So, firstly, I'd like to ask either of you, probably Joe, because we know Joe. Joe, what are the kind of overall issues with fossil fuels and traditional styles of energy production?
well, they're pretty dirty. You can,
Care to elaborate?
well, oil. Uh, oh goodness, I am not qualified for this.
Chuck, you want to chime in?
Well, we have our beloved coal, which, coal's was a pretty great thing. It creates a lot of heat, but it can power those steam mine things to pump out water from mines, and then we decided to put those on rails. It was a great thing. But now, of course, we have better forms of powering our stuff, and coal has a lot of disadvantages. You ever wonder why you had to use Play-Doh to clean your walls every year? Yeah, that kind of stuff gets in the air. Um, and then oil. It was a great replacement because it was actually cleaner, and it burned hotter, I think. And it was great for a while, but once again, still produces a lot of issues. And we're starting to come up with viable alternatives. Um, we also have what do you call it, peat, but we don't talk about that. Only the Irish really use that. So yeah, that's the problem with those traditional fossil fuels. But clean
Yeah.
energy.
Well, and on the fossil fuels, it's just generally not good for the environment as a whole, just burning through the ozone and uh, getting to ice caps and just I mean, everyone knows. It's not like it's unheard of by anyone just how bad the traditional forms of energy production are. They're just not great. But
Mm-hmm.
what do we think about clean energy? Joe.
Clean energy is dependent on multiple things, like where you get your materials from. Because even if you use clean energy, you're still pretty much polluting the earth with all the minerals you need to get in order to create something like a solar panel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Chuck?
Well, hydro electric dams are really fun, with how they work, but of course, you're kind of messing up the local ecosystem when you do that. And then windmills. Firstly, they cause existential dread in some people. I don't know if it's a officially diagnosed phobia, but like, yeah,
Oh,
for some reason
yeah.
people are irrationally afraid of them. But also, they kill a lot of birds. Of course, large glass windows also kill a lot of birds, but the windmills do it in more spectacular fashion. And plus, they're just kind of ugly. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever been driving up, through, say, Kansas, anywhere really in the center of the country, you will eventually just come into turbine farms, and there's so many of them. And I used to like it as a kid, but now it's depressing. It just reminds me of kind of the industrial expansion that's caused by a lot of the things we do now. And it's really, I mean, even producing those is, I mean, how do you make the actual metal or plastic or rubber or whatever that goes into these things. It's just more pollution of the environment. Same with solar panels. They are using really expensive minerals that have to be dug up with, well, coal mining operation, like that kind of materials. So it just it doesn't. It's like buying a new electric car. It's just as harmful to the environment. They don't last as long. They can be harmed by hail. Like none of it works. I mean, and just as Six Star said in the chat, it needs oil to function, like a lot. So, and hydroelectric, it destroys ecosystems. I don't think that they're really, other than being cleaner to an extent, they're not super clean. They still harm the environment. Whereas fossil fuels and traditional forms of power tend to harm the actual ecosystem. So think ozone, the ice caps, that kind of thing. Uh, the clean energy harms fauna. It harms animals. It like, if you drain out a river on one end and then it fills up on the other, then you've just killed hundreds of fish. You've rearranged ecosystems. Predators may outnumber prey. Prey may hyper outnumber predators in ecosystems. They just don't work. Now, that brings us to the third question. What do we think about nuclear energy? Joe?
I have my reservations on nuclear
Oh, feel free.
energy.
I'd like. I mean, I'm arguing for it, so I'd like to hear your opposition to it.
I mean, I definitely would like to see more nuclear power plants around, but let's use Japan for an example. With the whole Fukushima thing.
Mm.
Like, a simple natural disaster could, like, pollute the entire ocean
Interesting.
and ruin, like, tons of lives and kill, like, millions of sea creatures.
Interesting. Chuck, thoughts?
Well, I'm not as dour because as America, we're not in a position where we have to build our power plants right next to the coast. And if we're really concerned about it, we don't even have to build them near major population centers. Of course, then of course you have the problems of laying down the wires to transport the energy. But if you really are concerned about it, you don't have to build a nuclear power plant in your neighborhood. And a nuclear power plant may not be the prettiest thing on Earth, but it's easier to make look half decent than, say, a bunch of wind turbines. I mean, what are you going to disguise those as?
Yeah. Yeah, well, and plus nuclear plants, they're just, well, here's the thing. So first, to address what Joe was saying, there are niche occasions where these power plants can harm people and they can cause a lot of damage. Definite examples of those would be Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, Fukushima. But when it comes to those, the very rare incidences, they happen because of human error. For example, Chernobyl was caused by basically a super stress test of the reactor. They were supposed to do a routine check, but they pushed it back because they wanted to get a monthly bonus. And so and that was just inherent to the communist system of the USSR. But what happened is they then proceeded to push the reactor to its limit and then try and shut it off all at once. And because the reactor was so stressed from being pushed to its limit, when it was, they basically hit a button called AZ5, which when hit, immediately inserts all the control rods into the rods of uranium, shutting down the reaction. But the tips of them were made of graphite, which graphite accelerates nuclear reaction instead of slowing it down. And so, because the reactor had been pushed to the max, these graphite tips got stuck in place and infinitely accelerated the reaction until it exploded. Now, why were the tips made of graphite when these things are known to accelerate nuclear reactions? It's because they're cheap. It's a lot cheaper than making it like we do in the US, where we have boron tips, which like completely shut down nuclear reaction. And that's the issue of the Soviet system, which caused that. 3 Mile Island, I haven't read enough into, but I also believe was caused due to the worker error instead of actual issues with the energy itself. And Fukushima was just stupidly placed, like Chuck was saying. You don't put a nuclear reactor on a coast where hurricanes, tsunamis, etc. are common. But nuclear energy in and of itself, like even if you don't like traditional, well, firstly, let me address uranium is definitely dangerous. In even we still have to account for user error situations like with Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, Fukushima, and uranium's not really great for that. But we've found another element that we've been using recently that works a lot better. That is thorium. You see, thorium isn't as reactive as uranium unless you have a little bit of plutonium. And because of that, it means that if your reactor starts kind of getting shot into overdrive due to an issue, like say error of the operator, you just drain away the thorium and it goes away from the plutonium, and now you don't have a reaction anymore. It's just gone. And I mean, on the production level, thorium is a lot better than uranium. Thorium produces 1 ton of thorium produces the same amount of energy as 100 tons of uranium, which is the same as 10 million tons of coal. So 1 ton thorium, 10 million tons of coal. That's a big difference. That's multiple shifts in magnitude. And as regards the even thorium can be slightly dangerous. We now have it's looking in the modern day to have a completely non-dangerous form of nuclear energy, and that is nuclear fission fusion instead of fission. Fission is splitting atoms like uranium and thorium, right? Fusion is combining atoms, small atoms like hydrogen, helium, oxygen, right? If we put them, we figured it out actually like last year in October, around this time. We figured out how to fuse atoms together, and we created the first self-sustaining fusion reaction. And fusion goes way crazier than thorium does on energy production. I think 1 ton of material created by nuclear fusion, which is weird to think about when you combine materials to create a reaction instead of breaking them. But when you combine in nuclear fusion reaction, you get roughly 100 tons of thorium worth of energy. So that is 1 ton of nuclear fusion is 100 tons of thorium, and 1 ton of thorium is 100 tons of uranium, which is in and of itself is 10 million tons of coal. So you could power the entire U.S. I forget the exact numbers, but based off of how many megawatts are produced by nuclear fusion, you could run the entire United States energy basically with like 2 fusion reactors. It's super cheap. It's less dangerous. And I mean, what happens when you smash, say, hydrogen atoms together? You get helium. No one's afraid of helium. Yeah, unless you were, well, unless you were, well, or hydrogen, but unless you were on the Hindenburg. Like, these elements aren't inherently dangerous as compared to, say, uranium or thorium. They're just safer because you're just punching them together until they create something else. And I don't think generally that you get higher than like 20 on the um, periodic table of elements when you're doing nuclear fusion. So it's safer, it's cheaper, it's more effective. We could have basically free power because it's cheaper to run too. You don't have to go mining for all these expensive minerals to create nuclear fusion. You just have to have some basic materials. So it's a lot cheaper, a lot more effective, a lot safer, and would give us basically free power. So I think nuclear fusion and, I mean, fission to an extent, are really the future here. Sorry, I went on a bit of a rant, a speech there.
Oh no, it's not a ranch at all. But we do have to keep the coal mines working for one simple reason.
The
I must
children
power
near
my
the mountains.
choo-choos.
Must power your choo-choos.
Must
Yeah.
power the choo-choos. And then also, I mean, if we cancel out basically, I mean, okay, what is it? Well, the Isle of Wight Steam Railway, I think it is, in an entire year has a smaller carbon footprint than one transatlantic air flight. So,
Mm.
so just running, the choo-choos really wouldn't be that bad. I mean, obviously, the Isle of Wight Steam Railway has a bunch of small locomotives. It's not like they're running a big boy, but that's oil-fired at the moment anyway, so we don't talk about that. So, heritage railways, aren't really contributing that much to the global footprint. In fact, it would probably unironically be better for the environment if we just built a rail network with preserved steam locomotives that transported people, like a suburban railway network with steam locomotives, than running a bunch of cars. Like that I think that the math actually checks out that is still better for the environment, even if it is a dirty, inefficient steam locomotive.
Hmm.
So what I am saying here is steam locomotive supremacy, but that's another matter entirely. Although if we were going to do light rail, it would be electrics powered by our glorious nuclear power plants.
Yes, yes. So, to our second issue, which is not at all related to my project, wink, wink. Poverty. How are we, three dudes on a phone call, going to solve poverty? Charles?
Well, well, the brilliant part is, in a certain way, we already had the template. So as the Industrial Revolution was taking over, we were kind of dealing with the pros and cons. The pro is, we had a lot of new stuff. We could go places faster. Think about it. We could cross the Atlantic in 5 days. So exciting. Um, we can do all of these wonderful new things, produce goods more cheaply, so more people could get what was previously inaccessible to the upper class. I mean, for crying out loud, we think of the paperclip as like just this ubiquitous thing, and like the late 1800s, this was a real invention. But of course, the Industrial Revolution also had a lot of problems. Firstly, everyone started dying sooner because there was a bunch of a bunch of pollutants in the air. See, we're tying it back to the project. And then, but the immediate problem is that people started to their wages, may have technically been rising, but the conditions that they were living in declined more and more and more. And in response to this, Catholic social teaching, which had always been a good principle, which has always been around, was sort of written down, as it were. And one of the things that Catholic social teaching entails that our society has never really lived up to is that a just wage, and this is like the bare minimum, is that a man is able to care for himself and his family, living frugally, mind you. So it's not like everyone has to be able to afford a Porsche,
Yeah.
an electric Porsche, but living frugally, but one income, right? So the father is the only one who has to work. The mother can stay home and be the homemaker and take care of the kids. If the mother's selling something on Etsy as an extra source of income, that's fine, but she shouldn't have to do it. Make quilts for random people on the
Yeah.
internet.
Especially not
Um,
like a full-time job.
yeah, not like a
They
full
should
time
not
job,
have to do that.
just a side gig. And in a way, we've tried this, and the problem always is that these are the clumsy way we've done it is the minimum wage. And the minimum wage, it's better than nothing because it means that legally the guy can't pay you 250 an hour to slave away at a factory all the time. But the problem with the minimum wage is that it doesn't take into account the different positions that different people have. I mean, of course, um, if you have, and this is why minimum wages do vary from state to state, right? The minimum wage in California should be higher than it should be in, say, Michigan, partly because the taxes are outrageous, but that's an issue we can come to in a moment. Um, but it just costs more to live in Cali than Michigan. Why anyone wants to live in, like Joe, I am sorry.
Yeah, dude.
I truly am. But I do not understand why politics aside, why would you want to live in that climate? I'm just saying. Um, but
Why would anyone want to live in Michigan?
Because it's actually not horrible there, except for
yeah,
Detroit, but that's different.
yeah, I mean, climate wise, even now, we have I mean, our summers, like, I don't. I mean, I'm sure we've topped 100 degrees at some point, but generally speaking, we don't
Yeah.
get to the hundreds. And our summers could get to the 90s, which is annoying, but we're not getting to the.
Yes, Chuck, I guess you could say California is a sad state of affairs. Eh?
Your
Uh,
teacher should fail you
oh my
just for that.
goodness.
Okay,
Wow.
okay. Well, that's the kind of pun I would make. Like, you're supposed to be better than me. Okay,
I am, yeah.
you're supposed to hold me to a higher standard. So,
I
oh boy.
Well, we're not Jacobites, so we're already better than you.
hey, hush, hush,
Mm,
hush.
okay, well,
Listen here,
as
Joe.
I go off to march on Derby. Um, that's the first thing. That we need to find a way to make wages sustainable. And the problem is that I think that the government approach fundamentally is flawed because it can't the only way you can, I mean, someone suggested breaking down county to county, and that's probably the best way to do it, honestly, because ultimately everyone lives in a county, right? Not everyone lives in a city or a town, but everyone lives in a county. um Although I live in Genesee County, and the county is trying to take over everything, and the city of Flint is the only reason Genesee County hasn't taken over everything. Vive la indépendance. But come on, Mayor Neely, keep fighting the good fight. Don't let us be subject to the county commission. Um, but it needs to be even more local than that. It needs to be a cultural shift. We need to, right? Because when your boss doesn't, he's not just in an office in the same building, but when your boss, is someone you see like 40% of your shift because he's, checking up on things around the store, or he's also, working, or he's directly talking to the customers, or he's there. It's a lot harder for your boss to try and mentally weasel out of paying you enough when he sees that you're coming in with the exact same polo every day. Is there, do you not have have other polos? It's harder for a boss to weasel out of that, right? So it's even then, it has to be an understanding, that ultimately our purpose is to worship and honor God in this life, to be happy with Him forever in the next. But what part of the way we do that is by helping our fellow man. Part of the way we do that is by charity. And not just in the sense that I'm just giving you something but in the sense that we really are there to prop each other up and help move each other along. Because
Yeah.
if you're an employer, you have an obligation to make sure that that dad you're employing has enough time to think about his soul.
Mhm.
And that's where it has to be. We have to break these national corporations where employees really, from the perspective of the Walmart CEO, right? And I'm not personally accusing the Walmart CEO. Apparently Walmart actually wanted to do a $15 an hour national minimum wage, but then it was the stockholders who were like, please don't. um what but if you're the Walmart CEO, you have no real incentive to see the employees in your store in grand blank as anything other than just numbers on a sheet, because you don't talk to these people. You don't have to see what they live in. You don't it's not like you ever went over to their house, their houses, um to or whatnot, or talk with their kids or whatnot. I mean, you have no reason to care for these people. And we can get to the specifics of how to create a more, local economy, perhaps later in this episode or in another episode. But you got to
And
remember that at the end of the day, it used to be employers before the Industrial Revolution. You really knew who you were working for, right? When you worked in a small artisan shop, because there weren't massive corporations technically. I mean, the closest thing you got was the military. I mean, obviously you didn't know the king personally, who was technically your boss in the military, but that's different, right? The shop,
Yeah.
when you had the mercantile, the small shops, you knew who the owner of the shop was because you talked to him every day. You knew who the landlord was, in the sense that the landlord was an actual baron who would invite you in for Christmas and and would walk by and check up on you because from time to time. Um, that if he was good at his job, that is, that's where the Industrial Revolution, no one ever had time to think about the consequences. I mean, and that's not to say that we have to pause technological process until everyone has had a good long think for 40 years. But think before you act is a principle that we should follow. And if people had time to think about what the Industrial Revolution would mean, then we may have been able to create a better setup than what we have now.
Well, yeah, and to address a way that we could do that is one of the simplest guiding principles that has dominated Catholic social teaching and should dominate governmental teaching. And this is not a specifically religious view, but it is one that does come from the church, of course. And that is that when rights of people conflict with each other, right? So say we agree that people have the right to live a life without having to live in poverty, right? They should be able to live a comfortable, maybe not, you know, luxurious, but a comfortable life where they're not like you should not be stressing financials daily, right? The But when that comes into conflict with, say, I don't know, a shareholder's right to their say in company matters, right? The You have to balance rights and see which one is more important to, take care of. It's either someone's right to live or someone's right to have their money. And in the eyes of God, in the eyes of any reasonable person, someone will deserve to live over someone deserving to have a little extra money. And so one of the easiest ways to apply this is simply I mean, when it comes to rent control, for example, people have said that rent control makes no sense because then it would just limit the ability of people to build more housing for people who could use it. But here's the thing. Firstly, it doesn't because landlords and people who build um, housing, separate entities. But even if they weren't, it doesn't matter because there are still thousands upon thousands, maybe even millions of unhoused people and there are millions of just empty houses, apartments, places where people could be living, could be making a living from people, where people don't have to sleep under a bridge, but they're unable to because of these high rent prices that are being imposed. I mean, look at it like this. Back in the 50s, rent was roughly rent or housing prices were like if you take all the rent of a year, right? And then make that equivalent to how much you pay for a house for a year, they were roughly 80% of what you made in a year, right? That's high, but it's not crazy. Nowadays, it's more like rent and or buying a house is about 200% of what the average income is. That's ridiculous. I can't I can't ever have anyone explain to me that, my property rights over someone else's life. Property rights are important, but not enough to, take away someone's life or to take away someone's ability to live in non-poverty. I probably worded that a bit weird, but like, do you understand what I'm getting at here?
Yeah, and the thing is, with landlords too, it's getting to the point where they don't know each other. So in my neighborhood, on my street even, there's a house that's owned by a guy in like Tennessee or something. I mean, this guy's never been here. I mean, and the lady who's renting, she's like, yeah, my landlord hasn't fixed anything. I mean, she's paying, I can't remember, it was like 600 a month or something for this, and it's like you're paying all this money a month, and the guy hasn't had anyone out to fix it. This is. And once again, this is not to say that all landlords are terrible. My sister and her husband rent from um a guy, and he lives right across the street. So if there's a problem, he actually comes over and fixes it. You know, and the
Mhm.
house that they're renting isn't falling apart, which kind of helps. Um, I mean that's the thing, right? I mean it is not unreasonable to actually assume that it's not unreasonable to expect that landlords or it's not unreasonable to demand that a landlord either fulfill his end of the bargain, right? Or uh he has his ability to rent taken away. If a landlord is perpetually not fulfilling his there should be a system where if a landlord is not fulfilling his obligations and the tenant eventually takes it upon himself to fix the problem, there should be some sort of legal mechanism where that house, and if it's an apartment complex, it's going to be tricky. But if it's a house, that house is going to be transferred into his ownership, the renters. If for a year, 2 years, whatever, that essentially the tenant is basically acting like he owns the house because he has to, because the refrigerator caught on fire and the landlord isn't replacing the refrigerator. There has to be a method to get ownership out of the hands of these people and into the hands of people who actually care. And once again, this is not me being anti-landlord in concept, because sometimes it doesn't make sense for everyone to buy a house because maybe you're gonna you're only in this city for a year on a temp job, because your job has you travel or something. So it doesn't make sense for everyone to, or you're a military family, and of course you're going to get shipped around 15 times before eventually the kids leave home. Um, you know, it doesn't make sense for everyone to own. So I'm not anti-landlord as a concept, but we have to do everything in our power to ensure that the landlords are actually filling up their end of the bargain. And it's we're really great at evicting people who fall behind on rent. And in a certain sense, because if you can't afford to pay rent and you're not, then obviously that's a problem. But a lot of the people who are falling behind on rent are doing so because of all these other economic factors, not the least of which because they're paying hundreds of dollars for an apartment where the faucet's leaking all the time. Um,
Yeah.
so it's
And
we're really good at collecting, we're really good at evicting people. But how good are we at making sure that the landlord is actually filling his end of the bargain? Like, what recourse do these renters really have in that
that
sense?
that's why I've always kind of argued this idea, and this is, you'll probably hear this from others, but this is one that isn't as common here in the US, and that's the idea that, you know, individual liberty is not my favorite thing, and I think that we should, as a society, just grant people not charity as in like giving them money, but like charity in understanding, right? Like if someone isn't able to pay their rent, right? Let's say they're incapable of paying rent for a month or two, right? Maybe instead of just automatically evicting them the second they can't pay up, maybe give them charity, maybe let understand their situation, try and help out. Like I think that if society was more like that and we were able to be charitable toward one another, we wouldn't have as many issues. But we're so quick to enforce our right. It's a weird thing to say, but to enforce our rights on others, right? Like for a landlord to say, "You didn't pay me for living here, so I'm immediately going to evict you and kick you out on the street without any warning," right? Like that's non-charitable. Even if it is completely within their right to do so, it is uncharitable. And to do that, I think, is morally abhorrent. To just enforce your rights on people. So we need to, as a society, move in the direction of charity and in the direction of helping others as a rule, because that is, in the end, the most important uh, kind of societal Christian teaching is to help others, to be communitarian.
Yes. And
So, sorry, go ahead.
oh, and it is important to know that it's not just the landlords, but in so many ways, it's the entire system. You know, now I had to read this book for what do you call it, argumentative writing class, more for his argumentative strategies rather than actually being a book about poverty. But Poverty by America by a certain Matthew Desmond. Now, there's a lot of stuff in this book that I inherently disagree with. He says, "Let's make birth control, high quality birth control available to women."
You.
Mm.
Dude, there's this very simple form of birth control that we've had for a few millennia. It's called abstinence. Anyways, you should try it sometime. Well, he's married, so anyways, um,
You can still
so
technically practice abstinence when you're married within
uh,
a because abstinence, I guess it's more chastity, like
marital chastity, but no. So
exactly.
the thing is that no one's ever died of being a virgin disease. If that's the case, I'll probably be dead in a few years if that is an actual thing. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of really old priests. I don't think being a virgin disease is that much of a concern. A lot of old priests and nuns. Um, so no,
Indeed.
but he does raise some good points in his book. And the thing is that he uh he claims that tax breaks are basically a welfare or another form of welfare, and I,
That's dumb.
uh, I mean it's and that's just government entitlement that the government's entitled to this money, but we're just letting you keep it, which I don't necessarily agree. But if we are going to argue this, tax breaks or welfare thing, one thing we can do is just eliminate income tax for like the bottom 20%. Now, this is something. Remember income tax was originally supposed to be, well, it was introduced formally into our constitution um by because beer was what the government collected most of its tax on. Imagine that if the government could actually afford to run itself by majorly taxing one industry. like those days are boy, those days are gone. But income
Those
tax
were
was
the days.
essentially the replacement for the breweries, considering that we had we decided to be dumb and ban alcohol for a decade. Well, not a decade. It was less than a decade, but you know what I mean. No, it was more than a decade. Never mind.
It
Okay,
was more. Yeah.
okay. Me stupid. Um, but we do have this issue where income tax was originally going to be for the wealthy alone, and then it progressively expanded to everybody. And really, if we want to, what's the point of taxing, like, let's just say $2,000 from a poor family if you're going to give them $3,000 worth of government assistance? I mean, I mean, you might as well just uh, not tax their income, and then go through and reduce part of this
Well,
government bureaucracy.
and
Um,
point that's gonna, and this one, what I'm about to say will likely anger the left, the right, everyone. But I am for welfare. There goes the right, but only for morally upstanding individuals who contribute to society. And there goes the left. You see, I think that yes, welfare is extremely important, but if you're not willing to at least put in something to society to attempt to return what, because like I said, I was talking about charitability and giving back and being a community and helping each other. That doesn't mean sitting back and taking all the free handouts, right? That means, yeah, taking assistance when you need it, but also going and putting that back in, paying it forward, right? that's what you need to do. And so I don't think that welfare should be given to individuals who are just going to kick back and not do anything. I don't think that I don't think it should be given to people who are going to go and spend all their welfare money on drugs. Obviously, drug addiction's a horrible thing, and I think people should be helped through that. But until then, they're not getting their free government cash. And plus, here on that issue, you can just go into a live-in rehab. They give you housing, they help you with your addiction, they feed you, and then once you're clear of your addiction, then you can go and apply for welfare. Like that, I know it's unpopular with both the left and the right. Like, oh, welfare, how horrible, or restrictions on welfare, how horrible. But it's probably the best way we can do things to help people is to only help people who are willing to help themselves.
It. I mean, the thing is, of course, that most. I don't really know statistics, but most people on welfare are actually trying. It's just that everything else is still keeping them down, and
Yes. And
and
I'm
it
not saying that even if you're still kept in poverty, I absolutely think you should still be getting welfare. But
yeah.
even the littlest bit of people who just totally drag on the system and use it as a free cash cow, they still firstly give the system a horrible name to anyone who looks at it, and they also waste money.
Yeah. And most people use the EBT card, use it for actual food, but some people will not use it for real food like, M&Ms or something. And I think that's another reason why a lot of the American public really hates welfare, because because you're going to be more liable to see the bad examples than you are going to notice the people who are actually really, using the welfare as best as they can. I mean, it's just this weird tendency with people to, and we all do this, where we look at everything. Most, it's going great, it's working, but then we notice one bad thing and we focus on that. Like you get a
Negative bias.
yeah, it's you have this beautiful car and there's one tiny scratch. It's like, so um, and that's why you should scratch up your car so much that it looks like it was intentional.
No
Anyways,
advocating psychotic behavior on the podcast, Charles. Can't believe
I
I have
can
to
do
tell
what
you
I
that.
want. It's a free country. Anyway, no.
I just realized when I turn this in as a project, I'm gonna have to differentiate us. I'm gonna have to be
Eh,
like, because neither of us uses our real names, and neither of us refers to each other as our real names, and we sound identical. Well, nearly.
well, if you
It's
want, I could talk in
fine.
this high-pitched voice for the rest of the episode.
Well, you're
I
fine.
was.
I'll
Why
just
did
put
I
in.
slowly transition into like a bad Marge Simpson impersonation? Homer.
Yeah, no.
Anyway,
I'll just put in the
Okay,
notes. I'll be like, I am
the
so and so.
neighbors are at it again.
okay. So yeah, no. So yeah, there's all these things pressing down on these people. I mean, but one kind of welfare that does need to go: business welfare. Okay,
Oh, absolutely. I
no,
am so tired of seeing the government bail out businesses.
yeah. I mean, we live in, and it is this weird thing, right? Because the same people who are allegedly touting free markets and all are the same people who are like, bail us out, please. Like, how many times was Chrysler bailed out in the 20th century? They
I think of the Freedom Tunes video where it's like the poor person asking the government for some sort of assistance, and they're like, "Sucks for you. Should have made better financial decisions." And then cut to big businesses during COVID or whatever, and like they're crying like children, and it's like, "Oh, you poor thing. Here, have some government money."
yes, Jason, we're all tapped out. We have to.
I love that video. Oh, it's so good.
Everyone loves the government. Well,
That's classic.
it's and so the thing is, I mean, obviously, if we take the money that we give in subsidies to businesses, then yeah, and I mean, and if we are going to give businesses subsidies, because there is there under the monarchy, I think there is a place where businesses, like new businesses, local businesses that the crown has confidence in. The crown will lay out its requirements. That they will receive a loan of crown money to get started, but it's a loan. They're going to have to pay it back eventually, but it's going to be low interest. Basically no interest
Non-interest,
actually.
dog. Non-interest. The hell?
Non-interest. The only interest is a fee, basically.
Yeah. No.
To 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 pay for the people who are actually handing you the loan to pay for which
yeah.
is basically how it was in medieval Europe.
Just
Uh,
remember that usury is a sin, and we cannot support it in any fashion. Ugh.
Fashion. Well, I think there was in medieval. I think even in medieval times there was a distinction between like I think that an
Well, it
investment
was
was a different case,
no,
but
because the idea
eh,
of an upfront flat fee, and I'm going to very quickly take this to just a second to rail against usury. There's a difference between saying, "Hey, yeah, I can loan you this money, but since I'm doing this, you mind paying just a little extra on top of that? Like when you give it back, just give me like 50 extra or what? Like if it's a $1,000 loan, hey, throw 50 on top of that just for me giving it to you." That's not usury. Usury is the kind of crap the government does where they're like, "Oh, we invest in our future, in the education of our students for the future of America," and then proceed to give people who are fresh out of high school and don't have developed brains. So, for example, and this is going to be horrifying once you hear these numbers. There was a man who, when he turned 50, looked at his student loans. He had taken out a loan of $25,000 from the government to go to school, right? And by the time he was 50, he had paid off $75,000 in student loan debt. That is 3 times what he borrowed. And do you want to know how much he still owed?
how
A
much?
couple 100,000.
$200,000.
Hmm.
That is not a, hey, throw in some extra on top. That is, I'm going to bankrupt you because I'm an evil, corrupt system full of, okay, I was about to get very angry there for a moment. But it is ridiculous what student loans, how they, like compound interest and general interest, I hate them. Especially compound. It is such an evil idea. There's no way you can explain to someone compound interest and get them to like it unless they are objectively evil and out for exploiting people.
Yeah, I mean and this is the thing, right? When I say fees, in medieval Europe, I guess the thing with how it worked was what do you call it? There would be a little bit of a fee, but that was basically just to cover because like when with Christian banks, basically that was just to pay the people who were actually filing the loan. Like this was their you know I mean or you pay the people who are there to assist you, right? Like if this was a government program, you'd have to have pay someone to keep the and keep the lights on, right? It wasn't for profit. You weren't making a profit off of it. You were just it was basically there to just cover the cost because then you couldn't afford to lend to anybody. So that is, and then also, if you and also part of the thing is when you have these loans, you had to have collateral equal to the value of the loan, right?
Hmm.
And if you defaulted on your loan, let's say you defaulted on the loan halfway through. So let's say you borrowed $100 off me. You have your collateral for 100. I would sell the collateral that's worth 100, and give you back say $49 if I had a $1 fee for so I didn't starve. Um, but I would give you back the $49 because you already paid me 50. You already paid me half of the loan. I got that money back already. And if the collateral was, let's say the collateral was supposed to be worth 100, but it was worth 120, well, I give you 70. 70 back basically, because the agreement was I the collateral is supposed to cover your debt. So in a way, yeah, you lost your collateral. So hopefully you didn't,
But that was due to your own fault
but
of
that was
money.
due to your fault. But you're not financially, you're not particularly worse off. I mean, yeah, it's bad that it happened, especially, but you, um, it's not like our current system where if you default, you can't, you have nothing to pay it with, right? Because now we're taking out loans to buy houses. What do you have? What does the average American have that's worth the $100,000 value of the house that that
I
was
already
just
know.
bought?
Holographic Charizard. But but no, to address that point and what I think you're getting at, the idea of putting someone in financial slavery because they're unable to pay off a debt is absolutely abhorrent, and anyone who supports it is just objectively evil. Like how
Debtor's prison. It's going places.
debtor's prison, it's for horrible people. Or sorry, it's made by horrible people, I should.
Yeah. The Protestant Reformation and its consequence. Well, it can all be traced back to the Protestants. I'm telling you, right? Because the Catholic moral order was very clear on this, right? It's like if on usury, right? You got all these
Oh no.
documents defining usury, what is usury, what isn't usury, what really is usury.
Yeah, you
Um,
go back in time. You're put people in prison for not being able to pay off their loans. Are you psychotic?
yeah, it's and then you get to the Protestant Reformation. Suddenly everything comes up to interpretation, and then they're like,
Luther.
what?
Luther.
Luther, and then and this is gonna and and this is the thing, right? I don't want to get YouTube to kill me, but
But
but the thing is that the in the Mosaic law, right? You weren't allowed to charge interest to your fellow Jews. Um, well, I mean, but the Jews didn't have any qualms about lending at interest to other people because, well, they didn't have to follow that. Of course, we as Catholics don't like to charge interest in general because love thy neighbor and all that. Well, the Protestants were like, well, let's just borrow this notion and then let's just remove the you're not allowed to charge interest clause for anything. So you're not allowed to charge interest to X group. We're allowed to charge interest to anyone. So basically, they it's like they're not. You have these like weird groups of Protestants who like think that you're supposed to follow the Mosaic law for some reason. It's like, where did you get that notion? Um, I don't know. Just stop. Just repent and submit to Rome. It would make everything so much easier. It would
yeah.
everything would. I mean, I'm not saying everything be perfect because man's natural tendency to sin. They're not gonna stop that. Um, but it would
In
just be so
in
much
sh-
easier.
in short, don't be a horrible person. I mean, seems pretty standard, but I guess it's hard for some people.
Yeah, and the thing and the other thing is too is that part of the problem that we have is that we have loans now where it's essentially become part of the economy. You had to participate into it, and to add on top of that, it's kind of hard to tell what is usury and what isn't anymore in certain circumstances. Because if inflation is 2% per annum, and you have a loan that's going to take 10 years to pay off, um, 20% doesn't 20% interest over the course of the loan isn't the bank making money, it's the bank breaking even. So but that's still, and that's the part of the problem with the free floating currencies that we have and inflation and all that, which, by the way, the definition of inflation is the government printing currency. Okay, I know they want you to think that it's rising prices, but if you look at a dictionary from like 30 years ago, the definition of inflation was the government increasing the currency supply. The central banks are the ones who are kind of changed the definition on us. Okay, so rising prices can be through a lot of things like material shortages and whatnot, but ultimately there's one place where rising prices originate from, and that's the central bank of your country. Okay, just wanted to make that clear. Okay, that's as close to ANCAP mode as I'm gonna get.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So, in conclusion, have we solved poverty? Probably not. But have we informed those who have listened as to how to be a better human and, not be horrible? I think so.
yes, so I suppose that. Oh shoot! I just said Will can hop on. We got to extend this for about 5 minutes so he doesn't feel left out. Uh,
Aww.
uh,
Well, what are we going to think about that would be what will we speak on?
well, you see, kids, in 1952 or 54, I can't remember. British Rail introduced the Mark One coach. It was supposed to be a standard, utilitarian, but
Why are you
still actually
extending it
kind of good
now?
looking. What?
Will's not here. Why are you extending it now?
Well, he just said he's getting out his laptop.
Then we just wait for it. Well, I mean, you can cut, yeah.
Yeah, I can cut, but I'm giving people a history lesson. You see, you may be wondering why Britain's railways are so terrible. Well, it all started in 1945 when Clement Attlee was elected, uh, and the Labour Party was elected in a landslide. And part of the policy promise of the Labour government was the nationalization of the railways, which ultimately would take place on the 1st of January 1948. And all four of Britain's standard gauge railways were brought under the new banner of the very creative government owned company, British Railways. So if you ever want to look up the history of British railways, you have to say Britain's railways, otherwise, it's going to give you British Railways, the government owned corporate entity, rather than Britain's railways as a concept. Um, and this is where the problem begins because the British government was really wanted a modern, efficient transport system like what the Europeans were building, but there were a couple of problems. Firstly, they didn't want to pay for it. And the second problem is Britain's rail network was still mostly intact from the war because the Germans had damaged it with their bombings, but it wasn't completely leveled like it was in mainland Europe, where essentially the designers had a free hand to basically rebuild everything from the ground up because they had to do it anyway. So you could make gentler curves for faster running and whatnot. So the British government didn't want to pay for the necessary infrastructure upgrades, which meant that their services were a lot slower than they otherwise would have been. And they didn't want to pay for things like mass electrification because of the, no lie, okay, the East Coast Main Line. They didn't want to pay for mass electrification because the cost to like raise the ceiling of King's Cross Station would have been too great, which was probably a good thing in hindsight because they like every other station BR rebuilt was like completely hideous because it's post World War II. Actually, I wonder what happened to King's Cross eventually. They probably I mean they electrified it eventually, so I don't know if they just raised the roof or they just killed it. Um oh, actually it's still looking good. Let's see. Where is a modern picture of the Oh, no.
Will's still not here.
Yeah, oh, wait.
There he
Oh,
is.
okay.
Alfina.
What I
Yeah,
meant.
yeah, Six Star just posted another picture of what I just saw. What did they do? Look at how they massacred my boy.
What is that?
Doesn't
That
look
is
too bad.
That is King's Cross Station.
You're kidding.
Yep. They look at how they massacred my boy.
It
That's a
kind of looks like
crime
an
against
airport.
humanity.
What?
I said
It's
that was a crime against humanity.
indubitably.
Good taste.
Yeah, I don't. I need to see the platform. Like, what did they do to the platforms? Because, uh, you see, kids, steam may be a little dirty. It may be a little cause a little bit of soot, but they but the atmosphere around steam locomotives, when steam locomotives were in their heyday, where you had all this grand Victorian engineering, it made it all worth it in a way. Because now because back then no one was stupid enough to build these random spires in the middle of the walkway that extend up. I can't tell if this is if this is necessary for structural integrity, or if it's a part of the design, from a visual standpoint. What am I looking at? I'm looking at a skeletonized 3D print. I am looking at a weird frame, right? Because when you have a lot of traveling exhibits, rather than putting up permanent signage, obviously we have these frames that we put a fabric cloth with printed information on over it. That's what I'm looking at here. Go to my museum and you'll see the globe, right? It's part of a globe. It's like this uh fabric sheet, this large, massive fabric sheet, it's like 3 sections, stretched over basically that. Look at the inside of King's Cross Station now. You'll see what I'm talking about. This is this is a meme. This is an architectural student submitting it as a meme. And the people in charge of the station's renovation thought it was serious and went with it. That is what this is. I can't prove that I'm right, but you can't prove that I'm wrong.
Oh no, it's just a meme. It's a
I
total
mean,
meme.
anyway, besides our normally scheduled ranting on horrific modern architecture, what have we missed? Or what have I
So we
missed?
solved poverty.
Yes. No, so this episode has been a half and half because Chuck suggested we talk about poverty, and that actually brought me to something funny because I have a class project where I'm doing a podcast, and when I heard that in class, my ears, perked up. And it's called service learning. We basically have to find an issue in our community and try and figure out how to solve it. And I have chosen energy, and so we talked about how fossil fuel and traditional energy bad, and then clean energy bad, and nuclear energy good. That's what we did.
Man, I wish I could have been here earlier because I actually am well informed on all these topics.
Ah, yes. We also talked about how interest is stupid, landlords need to stop being so evil, and welfare should be a thing, but also only for certain groups of people who are giving back to society and are morally upstanding. I think that covers most of our bases.
Yeah, I admit landlords are like a big problem in my community, especially is in order to keep income taxes down, landlords will intentionally neglect their properties in order to depreciate the value.
Because they're evil people.
Yeah, at least the ones in
People,
my town are.
well, notice the fact that, and this is a stat I brought up earlier, rent or home owning prices, they're usually similar, just rent's cheaper on the, like, day-to-day, and home owning's cheaper on the long term, but anyway. Was roughly about 80%, well, 50 to 80% of your income in the 1950s, and nowadays it's like 200 to 800% of your income depending on where you live. And these are all averages.
Now, another interesting part that comes along with this is add in the fact that the average American pays just as much on transportation, such as owning and maintaining a vehicle, as they do on their housing.
Well, that's because the government has stupid laws regarding vehicles.
Must have light choo choo.
Yes, and actually now that you bring it up, I'm going to make a point that it's going to be like the point I made earlier that angers the left and the right. I like the idea of cities that you can walk from one end of to the other in a reasonable manner. However, I hate the idea of 15-minute cities. They are liberal inventions that are just stupid.
What's
Well,
a 15-minute city exactly?
Don't it's A 15-minute city is basically the idea of a walkable city, which is not actually a bad idea. Is actually I prefer it to, road cities that we have now. But like the idea is that you're able to walk from one end to the other in 15 minutes.
Okay.
Thing is, or you should be able to get anywhere in 15 minutes is what I mean by foot. Thing is that they tend to just be extremely liberal ideas, and they tend to implement a lot of anti-traditionalist laws, if that makes sense. Like, let me look up the
I
exact.
I dislike the modern. I feel like the intention is good. It's the execution that's bad when it comes to
So,
15-minute cities. If that makes sense, like they're on the right idea. It's a very very elitist way of trying to achieve it.
I mean, my idea of a city, I mean, should be that everything there should be a parish that's easily accessible,
of
a
course,
store that meets your basic like grocery needs and stuff that's easily accessible, and generally some of the service people that you're gonna need, like you know a plumber or a furniture maker or something. Um, it that is where we need to be, because uh
I mean,
so sorry, go ahead.
the three stores I would want within close proximity are a grocer, a baker, and maybe a pharmacy, and that would take care of 99% of my errands.
Mm. Yeah, one of the things about 15-minute cities is that they aren't like when we imagine a 15-minute city, right? Everything's within a 15-minute walk. We think of like towns, right? Little villages that you can just walk around in and you know everyone, right? 15-minute cities are more of an urbanistic idea where it's like, sure, you can get to everything you need within a 15-minute walk, but it's like these really high skyscrapers and there's, thousands of people per square mile, like New York kind of idea. Just New York, but no streets, just like walking.
Oh yeah, and I get the idea. I mean, not every place on Earth can be a small town or going to be huge metropolises that.
That's fine, but if you're gonna have a metropolis, it just makes more sense to get around on the road there. Like
Well, not
the
necessarily, because then you end up with big sprawling cities like Houston, and the roads end up taking up more space than the actual buildings that people inhabit themselves.
that's a different issue. Like I'm not saying I'm the thing is that you cannot expect a place that has thousands of people per square mile to be walkable.
On
It
contraire.
it no, it's not something that is feasible. All it and honestly the idea that everyone and this is just something that is really kind of being pushed by the modern left. The idea that everyone should live in a massive metropolis where you'll be fed your government processed foods and you will like it. You will eat the bugs, right? Um, Klaus Schwab, of course. Like it's all this very modernist globalist idea that everyone has to live in human packing containers in tall towers that dehumanize the environment and like just destroy everything. It's stupid. And we have enough land on the earth for people to live in small towns everywhere. That's never
I
been an
mean,
issue.
I get what you're saying, but the practicality and the feasibility of it doesn't work. Now, I think the Netherlands do a very good job at this because they do have large cities and they are very walkable, and they do it by combining personal transit with public transit and creating this basically a massive network of multiple transit options. And the idea is you use more than one transit option to get
Except
around the entirety of the city.
except in the Netherlands, there's really only one metropolis, and the
No.
cities that exist outside of aside from Amsterdam, which is the metropolis in and of itself, outside of that, all the other cities are just like they don't have these massive towers. They don't have thousands of people per square mile. They're not
Rotterdam. The hog.
They're yeah, no,
Or
those
is
aren't
it
those.
hog or haug?
It's Hague, but
Okay.
they're not metropolises. They're just cities. And I mean, even in say Amsterdam, you don't have skyscrapers like in New York. And I'm just very opposed to the idea of cramming people as tightly as possible as you can into these. Like, okay, a
Well,
15-minute city is the idea that to make a city walkable, you have to compact everything into a small area. A conservative idea of a walkable city is the idea that you should spread out populaces into smaller self-contained communities where people know each other.
well, the fact of the matter is that that doesn't always work, and that was sort of the logic that got us suburbia, and suburbia didn't exactly pan out. And what about
Suburbia is built around roads, which is the whole point.
really?
And
But
but
the initial
I'm
idea of
sorry,
suburbia was to basically subsidize and create small industrially built communities.
but I will never support 15-minute cities because they will always dehumanize the idea of living in community, and they will always destroy any sort of um, because again, the whole idea of of a walkable city is that you can not only get to things without having to have an automobile, but also that you just know the people near you and that you can have community. You can't have community where there's thousands of people within a mile of you. That's
Well,
just
you
not.
can. You'll still have neighbors. You'll still have the people you work with, the people you see at like stores and stuff.
Yeah, that's not. I'm not saying no. You can't make any connect. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that it makes actual community harder. Like you obviously have people that you know, but it's not the same as a small town where you can know everyone
Well, of
or
course it's
most
not.
everyone.
Well, of course it's not the same as a small town. But to say that someone doesn't have community just because they don't know everyone in the place they live
Well,
is.
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that community is broken down the more tightly people are packed together. People are not meant to live in such tight communities as like obviously I like, tight communities, but I don't like extremely compacted communities. And that's why I'm inherently against 15-minute cities.
I mean, yeah, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying it's not necessarily feasibly realistic in some places. Like you, you can't expect rural idealism with small towns and say like Japan.
I'm not saying that, but I'm
Yeah.
also saying that those people shouldn't be able to expect to get everyone on foot. You're gonna have to have like once you get big enough, you're gonna have to have roads. You can't
Preferably
escape
ones
roads.
with rails.
Or rails, that's fine, but you can't just have everything be walkable in such a dense community that it's just not going to work that way.
Right. And I think a big thing here is the misconstruing of the idea is walkabilism. That means you have to get everywhere on foot. It just means that everything is accessible by foot. That means you can still use buses and trains and everything. So long as you're not getting into a personal automobile, it's considered categorically walkable.
See that I deny that because the idea that that public transit is inherently better than personal transit is stupid, and it's I I just think by and large, yes, I know that it's not possible everywhere, but by and large, cities are stupid, and you should not be having these massive metropoli? No,
Is this what
metropoli
the plural was metropolis? Is that correct?
metropolises. I think that's the plural. You should not have. You should firstly, metropolises should be a last resort kind of thing. They should be something that is not inherently. You definitely shouldn't be seeking it out because they either turn into compacted, basically sardine can cities like uh, Tokyo or New York or London, or they turn into like sad abomination roads that happen to have buildings on their sidewalks, like Houston or Dallas. That's why I'm generally just against big cities. They're not a good idea.
Hmm.
Humans naturally just want to spread out more, and we should be catering to what humans do best.
I mean, yeah, like I said, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying it's not feasible.
And I addressed that. Anyway, anything else we have to talk about, Chuck?
Um. How much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck?
Okay. How
Actually,
about
I
we?
think
I
someone did
need
a
to
study.
know the
Okay,
rest of that rhyme, though. That's the
how
thing.
much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood?
Yeah. All
No,
right. We
but
want
no, but how? Actually, I think speaking of the government wasting money, I think the government actually, or not. I don't know if it was the government, but I think a college actually did do a study on that once.
to.
I can't remember the answer, but apparently it was a few. I can't remember if it was like a couple hundred tons a year or something. But yeah. So just so you know, the research money you put into the government is going into good hands for viable studies, like how to solve cancer, how to combat viruses more efficiently by creating new viruses, by and solving the answers to tongue twisters. Um, we're in good hands.
Wait, what do
Everything
you
is
mean
all right.
solving the answers to tongue twisters? What are they using my precious tax dollars on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, so while we
Let's
get
close it
taken
out.
out by Government Research Bureau for daring to question whether or not finding out exactly who is selling seashells by the seashore, um, uh, apparently it was what was her name? She was found some
Sally.
fossils. What?
Sally.
Sally? What was her name? Sally.
Sally Sue sells seashell.
Sally sells seashells by the seashore. Ha!
Okay. Well, Um, yeah, let's not continue this trend because I'm gonna lose in a prolonged match. So
What do we think of Michael Knowles possibly joining the winning side?
Michael
what?
Knowles becoming a monarchist. Yes, he's been
He's
saying.
slowly drifting there.
I mean, he's already a Jacobite because I remember when he posted that on Twitter that that
I mean, it could have been ironic,
it could have
but
been, but a lot of things start out as ironic until we start believing them. It's like I used to say women's suffrage. I don't even believe in regular suffrage, ironically. But now I'm at the point where it makes. Oh, have I told this story on the podcast before?
I
Okay.
think you did during the anniversary, the 100th episode anniversary.
The car thing,
Yeah,
the
and
concept car. I did. Oh,
All
I
right,
like
oh,
I
you
think we're
telling
getting
forgot
people.
of
wild,
your role I gave
gentlemen.
you.
I
No, no,
do
no, no,
believe.
not the roll, not the roll. No, 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 no.
Oh yeah, we'll talk. Well, we'll talk about that later. But
No, 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 no.
uh,
Oh, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say we should close this out. We're getting wildly off topic.
Oh, no, no, but this actually is a good story about this.
Tisk
Okay.
tisk.
No, no, no. It is a good story. It's going to prove to you why democracy is bad. I'm going to prove it to you undeniably that the universal
Get into
suffrage.
it.
No, no, no. Hold on. Okay,
There we
so
go.
okay, there is this concept car at my place of employment, right? And it's not a normal looking car. Like there's a lot of obvious questions like how do you fit into it? How fast does it go? Right? It's from a video game. There is a little sign that has I counted it 178 words, and a lot of those are repeats, like the copyright for the photo or GM. I'm counting the GM logo as a word, so there's a lot of you don't even have to read all 178 words. People will look at this car, see the board that has these questions, and seriously ask, well, how do you sit in it? You you can't be bothered to read a simple board that has the answers to all of your questions. It's they're not even like what the technical definition of a paragraph that they teach you throughout elementary school is 5 sentences or
Chuck,
three, depending on who you
Chuck,
ask.
Chuck, I hate to be the guy to tell you this, but that's kind of your job as working at the museum as a historian is to answer people's stupid
No, 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 no,
questions
no, no,
like
no.
that.
My job is to fix the interact. My job is to fix the assembly line when it breaks. My job technically doesn't involve interacting with the public. Okay, the we don't have the resources to have somebody standing by each car to explain it. That's
No,
why
you
we
don't have
have
them
this.
stand by each car. You just have them walk through
We
the
don't
main
we don't
menu
have the
section.
resources. We really do not have the resources to do that. We don't have the resources to put anyone in the history section. Not at all.
Right.
Nope, they're all in the
Yeah.
Discovery Center with the sciencey kitty stuff. Okay,
Yeah,
and
understandable.
making sure the toddlers don't run out of the toddler area. Right, that's where all the floor staff are. So there, but that's what the sign's for. The little sign is there to explain these things. You know, like you see the tank destroyer, you get a little thing on the tank destroyer that we have, our M18. You know, you see, right, the people who cannot be bothered to read to answer these questions. If you cannot be bothered to read the giant sign that is, or the giant stand with all this information that is right there, and you seriously have these questions, and I see this every single time, you know, not every single time, because some people will actually read it, then you should not be allowed to vote. We put a little camera there, okay? And the people who, if we're going to continue with democracy at all, we put a little camera there. The people who look at it are like, huh, how does that work? And then read the sign, we give them a voting card. The people who ask the question out loud, how does this work? And then don't read it, will be permanently barred from voting. That's my new voting policy. Like if we have to continue with voting, like as a concept, okay, that's how. Forget any sort of IQ test. Forget a written portion. Forget whatever things the South was doing in the 1950s that would later be made illegal. Forget all of that. This is that test. Okay, get that concept car, put it in a room with the board, the very obvious board. That is my voting test.
So
Okay, it's
basically,
simple, it's objective. There's no room for bias because no one, it's not going to be prejudice on race or sex or anything else. Very
so
simple.
basically, it's a similar concept I've heard to what is called the shopping cart test. But instead of using the morality of putting up a shopping cart, you're using the idea of whether or not people bother to actually read basic instructions.
Yes, because if you cannot be bothered to read a 178-page board, and you're still and you're like, how does this work? Then you cannot be trusted to do any research on the people who are doing it. Like, it makes sense. It really does. It makes sense why we have such terrible leadership. I mean, look at who's voting. I mean,
But for those of you who don't know, the shopping cart experiment is basically a question on human beings' willingness to be moral. Basically, the idea is putting up a shopping cart, you don't get rewarded for it. It's not legally required for you to do it. You're just supposed to do it out of courtesy. And so the idea is basically you're testing how moral people are by whether or not they're actually just simply bothered to put up the shopping cart.
the people who are unable to do this are no better than wild animals, absolute savages who can only be made to do what is right by the law and the force that stands behind it.
I'm guessing you've seen the post before because the people who came up with the experiment basically said that exact same thing.
So there we go. That's why democracy bad, and anyone who supports it will have to be made to do my job. So you're coming up,
No,
fixing the checking on the exhibit or the interactive, making sure it isn't broken, and hearing that. Do my job for about 2 months and see if you still believe in democracy.
the amazing thing about being democratic skeptic in the US is you'd figure more people would be it because it starts young. Like when we're in high school still and we're voting for class president and everything, it's like we all know it's a popularity contest and they're not being picked based off of their objective skills and capabilities. Yet when we get into the real world and we have government elections, we don't think the same thing. Why don't we come to the same conclusion with those? None of the principles change. It's just on a bigger scale. So why do we consider those small classroom elections illegitimate in finding proper leadership, but we still use the system to find government, to make a government.
So we are now going to wrap this up. Belated, I know, but just remember that if anyone tells you democracy good, say
Cringe.
democracy bad, because it just. So if you would like to join us live for Monarchist Minute, then you can follow us, mosey on down to that to our Discord server link in the
In the
description below.
description below.
If you would like to read our glorious newspaper, The Cavalier, which I've just about finished typing up my article for edition 4, this is going to be,
Yes,
then
fourth edition.
what?
Yeah, that's the one that's coming out. Fourth edition of the Cavalier,
4th edition. It's like
edited by yours truly.
yes, it's the Horseman Strikes Back. Or no, wait, no, that's 5. Dang it, a new a new hope, a new Horseman. Okay, Star Wars puns, yay. I should really just fire myself at this point. I can't. Okay, if you would like to follow us on the website formerly known as Twitter, then you can mosey on down to our Twitter link in the description
In the
below. If you would like to
description
see all of
below.
our other things, then you know what? Go on to those links in the description below.
The description below.
In the description below, where there's nothing to do but go with the flow. You can see everything that we do, and it's there just for you.
No
Okay,
singing.
look,
Don't sing again, ever.
we'll sing again. No, seriously, we'll sing again.
Don't do this to me. I can't sing.
Okay.
I was in choir in middle school, but then my voice dropped, and now I'm tone deaf. Do not make me sing.
Yeah, it's it's a thing. I wish I can get pretty high if I try. Okay, that's gonna be taken out of context. I could have a high pitch tone if I try, but I can't hold it. I don't think it's. eh, So now I have to do the sad voice. Anyways, leaves me with quite a terrible choice. But now it is time to conclude in prayer. So.
In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thy is the kingdom, power, and glory forever. Amen.
Amen.
Son, Holy Ghost, amen. So, until next week, may God bless you and may God bless the United States of America.